The hero party has just managed to seal the demon lord away, but even though this is a monumental victory, unless they can defeat him once and for all, the world will always be in danger of being destroyed. They all feel guilty for not being able to complete their mission, but their leader tells them that there's still hope because he is sure that someday in the future, a new hero will appear to carry on their legacy and finally finish the demon lord off for good. Several years later, at the A-rank party, Thunderpike is in the middle of a public dungeon raid, and while the two melee fighters attack, the magic users begin casting their spells. And thanks to the buffs from the party's supporter, Yuka, they are able to take a Hydra down in record time. Individually, the members of Thunderpike are already really strong, but when they work together, they are nearly unbeatable, which is part of the reason why they have so many fans. However, while they may look like the perfect team on the surface, it turns out they don't really get along as well as you'd think. In fact, after the stream ended, the red mage Yuka tells everyone on the team that he is quitting Thunderpike effective immediately. The party leader, Simon, asks him why he wants to leave, so Yuka explains that he isn't getting a fair cut of their reward money. The money he received today is so little that he may have to start taking out payday loans, and that's a situation he doesn't want to be in. Simon tries to justify Yuka's low pay by claiming that Yuka isn't contributing enough to the party, and Barry chimes in to point out that Yuka never actually engages in any battles. All he ever does is burn through their items' durability with his pointless enchantments. Yuka can't believe Barry would call his enchantments useless, but Barry isn't the only one who feels that way. The only one who actually thinks Yuka is useful is Jamie, but that's just because he's good at setting up their streams. Camilla tells him that if he wants to be paid more, then he has to be more active as a member of the team, but Yuka doesn't think she has the right to say that since she's basically a healer, and Yuka is always protecting her in battle. The fact that they don't value the work he does is exactly why he wants to quit the party, but Simon asks him if he's really sure he can manage on his own if he leaves. He says the only reason Yuka is even B rank is because they are childhood friends and Simon did him a favor by letting him join Thunderpike, and even if he leaves, they'll be just fine without him. Since they clearly doesn't think Yuka deserves to be paid well, Yuka definitely isn't going to stick around. Yuka has wasted the last 5 years of his life supporting this party, and they would never have gotten this far without his help, but the others still all think he's useless, so they won't miss him at all. Now that Yuka has officially quit Thunderpike, he heads to the guild receptionist to ask if there's any work available. She's surprised that a famous adventurer like him is here to look for a gig, so she asks him if something happened with Thunderpike, and Yuka explains that he quit. The receptionist doesn't seem that surprised since things like this happen all the time, so she hands Yuka a form to fill out so she can give him a new party. Once he's done filling out the form, he hands it to the receptionist, but just then, a girl comes running up to him for a big hug. The girl's name is Marina, and she used to be one of Yuka's students back when he taught preliminary adventurer classes half a year ago, and Yuka is glad she's doing alright. She's curious about why Yuka is here, so she asks him, and he tells her that he is currently looking for a new party since he recently left Thunderpike. Marina doesn't even let him finish his sentence, because if he's looking for a new party, then she would love to have her beloved teacher in hers. Yuka agrees to her proposition, so a few minutes later he is seated with Marina and the rest of her party members so they can discuss his joining. Silk loves the idea of Yuka joining their party, but she is surprised that an experienced adventurer like him wants to join their D-rank party. Yuka is currently B rank, so he could probably get into a much better party, but he doesn't mind being in a D-rank party, and to be honest, he actually prefers it this way. Back when he was in Thunderpike, they would always take on high-level missions, so Yuka would have to buy a ton of magic items to prepare, which left him in constant debt. That's why he wants to take it easy for a while, and just deal with some low-level quests instead. Since Marina, Silk, and Rain are all on board with the idea, Yuka officially joins their party, and their first mission together is to collect magic iron ore from the Painto Mine dungeon. It's been a long time since Yuka felt excited to go on a mission like this, and it definitely brings back a lot of old memories from when he was starting out as an adventurer. Yuka recalls that this dungeon has a lot of magic ore veins on the 6th floor, and Silk tells him he is correct, but they were hoping to avoid fighting the 5th floor boss, so Yuka suggests they should start on the 4th floor instead. As they enter the dungeon, Marina takes the lead and uses the stick to check for any traps that may have been set, and Yuka is so proud because she's doing it exactly how he taught her. But for now, he asks her to let him take the lead since he has a more efficient method. Marina doesn't understand what he means since their party doesn't have a scout or thief to detect the traps, but while that may be true, Yuka has a magic item that should be useful in this situation. It's a detection lamp, and thanks to a special type of oil, it illuminates traps, so they can spot them just like a scout would. The lamp really is useful, but Silk asks if it's okay for Yuka to be using it since special oil sounds really expensive. And yes, it normally is, but Yuka made this oil with his alchemy, so it didn't cost him much. The party continues walking down the corridor while carefully avoiding all the traps, until eventually, Yuka stops everyone because he can sense something up ahead. He warns the others and tells them that they should prepare for a fight, so they all rush in together and are confronted by a group of boggles. Silk decides to take the initiative and fires the first shot to take one of the boggles down, while Marina runs in to handle the rest. As she does this, Yuka casts overlapping physical enchantments on her so she can fight better, and at the same time, he casts a debuff on the boggles to trip them up. While the boggles are disoriented, Marina goes in for her attack, and in one fluid motion, she is able to cut both of them in half, something even she is surprised by. She turns around to ask Yuka if that feeling she just experienced was his magic, so Yuka confirms that he had cast 3 types of enchantment on Marina to help with her fight. Rain can't believe Yuka was able to cast 3 enchantments at once, and on top of that, he managed to do it with no incantation, but Yuka doesn't think it was all that impressive, so he just says they should keep moving. As they continue through the mine, he asks the girls about their usual dungeon exploration routine, so Marina proudly explains that they always take a break after each floor and check their equipment, just like he taught them to do. Since that's the case, Yuka suggests that they should rest a bit before they continue. After their break, Marina and the others check all their equipment for damage and everything seems to be in working order, so they are ready to continue their mission and head down to the next floor. On the second floor of the dungeon, the group is suddenly ambushed by a group of undead miners, and the only way to get rid of them is for Rain to use holy magic, so everyone needs to protect her while she uses her chant. Marina and Silk plan to handle the defense, but Yuka tells them he has this covered, so he casts a blessing of light on all of them. And while it won't kill the undead miners, it does stop them from coming any closer, so it's a good defensive measure. Eventually, Rain finishes the holy light spell and uses it to eradicate the undead, and once they are safe, Marina begins praising Rain for a job well done. Yuka praises her as well since there aren't many people who can use light magic on the scale that Rain just did, but doing that probably drained a ton of her mana, so he casts Refresh Mana to help her recover. Rain can't believe Yuka can use Refresh Mana since that's a really rare skill. It completely restores the mana of whomever it is cast on, and having that skill alone would make Yuka insanely valuable to any party that works with him. But Yuka thinks she's exaggerating a little because he only learnt Refresh Mana as a way to compensate for having an obscure job like a red mage, although it was really difficult for him to learn it. Afterwards, the group continues walking down the path, and as they go, Yuka begins pouring a liquid on the ground. Silk asks him what he's doing, so Yuka explains that he's pouring holy water over their footprints in order to stop undead monsters from following them. Silk is worried and asks if it's really okay for him to waste his holy water like that since it's really expensive. But Yuka tells her it's fine since once again he made this himself. The group is in shock that Yuka is able to make holy water even though he isn't a priest, but he has a special method for it. By purifying the ashes left behind by the undead when they are defeated, Yuka is able to process it into holy water, and the ashes he got from the undead miners will be more than enough to make up for the amount of holy water he's using. By the time they finally make it to the 3rd floor, Yuka suggests that they should take another break since they'll begin mining from this point forward. And since they haven't eaten for a while, he whips out some cooking utensils from his magic bag and says he will make them a meal. Magic bags aren't that rare, but this is Rain's first time seeing a magic bag in person, so she's really excited. Yuka puts some sausage and eggs in a pan, and while that's cooking up, he pulls out a special pot. The girls watch as he taps on the side of the pot and it instantly fills up, so Yuka explains that the pot is a rare artifact that he found in a royal palace ruin. It basically fills up with a random soup every time you use it, so it's really handy to have. The girls are really grateful to Yuka since this is the first time they've gotten to have such a good meal while in the middle of a dungeon mission. But when Silk takes a closer look at the food, she realizes that it has mana radiating out of it. She asks Yuka about it, but he tells her there's nothing special about the food since all he did was prepare it with lots of love. His alchemy skills might have accidentally enchanted the food, however, it shouldn't be a problem. The group eventually makes it to the 4th floor of the dungeon and are confronted by a rock lizard, but as the monster charges at them, Yuka casts a slow spell on it, so it practically freezes in place. Marina then rushes forward to attack, and normally she wouldn't risk it, but since Yuka's enchantments have buffed her strength and stamina, she decides to try using her magic blade ability. And with it, she is able to slice the rock lizard's head off in one go. Once the fight is over, Marina is totally exhausted since Magic Blade uses up a ton of her mana, but Yuka encourages her to keep using it as much as possible, because eventually her body will get used to it. But for now, he casts Refresh Mana to help her recover. Anyway, there are a lot of magic ores here, so Yuka begins mining with the girls, and after a little while, they manage to gather a ton of magic ores. Yuka asks if this is enough to fulfill the requirements of their quest, but Silk says they actually need a bit more. Unfortunately, there are no more magic ores on this floor, so their only option now is to defeat the 5th floor boss and go down to the 6th floor to gather the remaining ores. The girls don't like the sound of that since the 5th floor boss is called the Novice Crusher Steel Crab, and they aren't sure they can survive against something like that, but Yuka tells them they don't need to worry since he will do his best to handle a boss on his own. A little while later, they arrive at the boss's room, but before they head in, Yuka pulls out a camera artifact. Rain recognizes the artifact and asks if Yuka plans to livestream his battle, but he was actually just going to record instead. He always records his battles so he can study his mistakes later, if he's going to be recording anyway. Marina asks him to make it a live stream since she thinks it will be a lot of fun. Yuka is fine with live streaming his fight, but while he's setting it up, he realizes he doesn't know the name of this party. He asks them, but Silk tells him they haven't actually thought of a party name yet, and in fact, they aren't even officially registered yet. Since that's the case, he asks them if they've got any good ideas for a team name, so Marina thinks for a second and comes up with the name Clover. Specifically, a 4-leaf clover to represent their 4 members, and everyone really likes the name, so from now on, they shall be known as Clover. Just then, Yuka realizes that this is going to be her party's first live stream, and he feels bad if he was the only one who got a spotlight, so he asks the others if they want to help him fight the boss, but they all tell him that it's fine for him to handle it solo. In that case, Yuka isn't going to hold back, so he casts great Blink Shadow and Protector Shield buffs on himself, and then enters the boss room. The Steel Crab awakens and immediately tries to strike Yuka, but he uses his speed buffs to dodge, and once he's out of the crab's range, he begins casting tons of debuff spells on it. And once the crab is sufficiently weakened, he casts a gravity spell to crush it against the floor. With this, the Steel Crab boss has been defeated, and it didn't even take him 1 minute to do it, so Yuka is pleased with his performance. He then ends the stream and Marina runs up to hug him for being so amazing. But she's hugging him a little too hard, so the others ask her to let go before Yuka ends up in a wheelchair. After making sure his back is fine, Yuka tells everyone that they should bring the Steel Crab's body back to the guild so they can sell the parts. He stores the entire things in his magic bag, and that's a huge help since they never would have been able to carry it back by themselves. So far, Yuka has been indispensable to their party, but Silk doesn't think it's fair for them to constantly be relying on Yuka like this, so Yuka suggests that next time they have a boss battle, everyone can participate so they'll gain some experience. The girls like the sound of that, but for now, they still have to open the treasure chest they get for killing the floor boss, and when they do, they find a ton of magic ores, so it looks like they won't have to mine anymore after all. Dungeon streams are really popular all around the world as they are a great source of publicity, so big companies often offer sponsorship deals to popular streamers. And right now, Yuka's popularity is at an all-time high because the video of him defeating the Steel Crab with nothing but status effect spells has gone viral. Meanwhile, Yuka and the others are returning home, and while on the carriage, Yuka asks them what they thought of their first mission together, and the girls absolutely loved it. They learned all sorts of cool things from Yuka, so this was easily the best mission they've completed so far. In fact, they were all thinking of making Yuka the official leader of their party since he has the most experience, and they all trust him with their lives since he was their teacher. Yuka is hesitant to accept the role since he never intended to take over Marina's party, but since they all say they want him to do it, he ends up agreeing, mostly so he can ensure their safety in future battles. While Yuka's party is celebrating their first victory, Thunder Pike is suffering a crushing defeat. Simon hired a new guy to replace Yuka after he quit, but he must still not realize how much Yuka was carrying their party because he led them right into wolf territory and expected everything to just work out. Normally, Yuka would have cast a weakening spell in the wolves by now, but the new guy can't do that, so the wolves are way too strong for the party to handle, and as a result, Jamie gets chomped. Simon sees her in trouble and rushes to save her by decapitating the wolf, and while Jamie is technically safe now, her stomach is full of holes, so she'll die if she doesn't get help soon. Simon asks Camilla to cast a healing spell on Jamie, but Camilla says she's out of mana, so there's nothing she can do. It's not like they had a guide who could cast a mana restoration spell, did they? The group retreats to safety and Simon administers first aid to try and keep Jamie alive while Camilla's mana recharges. He asks if anyone has a healing potion and the new guy, Cork, has one, but he doesn't feel like giving it to Simon since Simon made it painfully clear that he was responsible for buying his own equipment with his own money. Simon tells him that now's not the time to be worrying about money when one of his teammates is about to die, so Cork reluctantly hands over the healing potion and Simon feeds it to Jamie. Thunder Pike has really been on a downward spiral lately, but on the flip side, everything has been working out for Yuka. He and the girls are sitting at the bar to celebrate, and while the reward for their quest wasn't that high, the Steel Crab's body was in good condition, so the guild paid a good price for it. Speaking of money, Yuka asks Marina and the others what system they've been using to split up the party's earnings, so they tell him that Silk usually handles all the party's money and each member gets a set allowance. Yuka is a little surprised since it's rare for a party to entrust all the money to a single member, but the group has a reason for that. They've all been saving up so they can eventually afford to buy a house as a party, since it's a little awkward to have to be renting at the inn all the time. Since they are trying to save their money, Yuka tells them it's fine if they continue with the allowance system. Silk asks if he is really okay with her handling all the finances since she thought an adventurer like him would want to handle his own money, but Yuka trusts her, so there's no reason to change the system they already have. While Yuka and the other are having fun and getting along, Simone and the rest of Thunder Pike are upset because that was the worst outcome they had in years. Thankfully, they were able to save Jamie's life, but things could have gone really badly, and Simone blames it all on Cork. The rest of the party get in on it and start calling Cork useless for not being able to get them out of that mess, but Cork isn't going to let them put the blame on him since everyone knows that dire wolves track their prey through scent, so it's common sense to buy a scent blocker in preparation for the mission. This is clearly the party's fault for not being prepared for the situation, but Simone tries to turn it around on Cork and says that if he knew about the scent blockers, then he should have told them. And the fact that Jamie almost died is entirely his fault too because he didn't buy scent blockers for the entire party. The gaslighting is strong with this one. But thankfully, it's not strong enough to fool Corks, so he realizes he wants no part in a party where no one is willing to take accountability for their mistakes and quits on the spot. Yuka overhears this, and he can't believe Thunder Pike still hasn't learned from their mistakes, but that doesn't concern him anymore. He turns back to the girls, and Marina tells everyone what they should do for tomorrow. Silk remembers something Yuka once told her about it being important to take a day off after every mission, so she suggests that they do that. Everyone agrees, and since Yuka is going to have the day off, he decides to get a little shopping done. He needs to stock up on potions and scrolls, and he still needs to turn those undead ashes he got into holy water so he can replenish his stock. He's going to be busy for a while, so he suggests that they all meet back up here after their break is over. Just then, Marina notices that the dungeon stream highlights of the day are being shown, and Yuka's fight against the steel crab is number 1. He is shocked since he only uploaded it a couple of hours ago, but it already has over 5,000 viewers, and it's still going up. People find it really interesting that someone with an obscure job like a red mage was able to take down a red crab without even needing to touch it. The announcers tell everyone to keep an eye on Yuka and his party, Clover, because they just might become the world's greatest party. Simone and the other members of Thunder Pike see Yuka's stream as well, and they are all incredibly jealous that Yuka is actually doing well without them, but they still refuse to admit that Yuka might have been more useful to them than they gave him credit for. Thunder Pike is always going to be a bunch of haters, but it looks like there is actually someone else hating on Yuka from a distance, and he seems mad that Yuka is getting comfortable with his new party. A couple of days later, Yuka is back in the guild, and he's looking at the notice board to see if he can find any quests that will be good for the girls. The receptionist sees him struggling to decide, so she comes over and asks if she can help. Yuka asks her if there are any quests that are easy enough for a party of noobs, but also paying a decent amount of money. The receptionist tells him that he is being a little too optimistic here. He's never going to find such a perfect quest, but given the circumstances, she points to a C-rank quest that involves fetching some magic stones from the Orden Forest. Yuka thinks this just might work, but he's a little curious as to why the quest is C-rank when fetching magic stones would usually only be D-rank. The receptionist explains that there has been a large magical beast sighted near the forest, so this quest is slightly more dangerous than normal. Just then, Marina enters the guild, and as soon as she hears the word quest, she immediately yells that their party will accept it. Yuka asks her to at least let him finish explaining before she agrees to do the quest, but Marina says she doesn't need to know the details since if Yuka thinks they can handle it, then she is sure they'll be able to get it done. It shouldn't be too hard anyway since she and the others have done a quest in that forest before, although she doesn't understand why this quest would be C-rank when all the other quests are D-rank. This is when Yuka chimes in and says that the quest is C-rank because there is a magic beast living somewhere in that forest now. Hearing that there's a magical beast in the forest makes the girls reconsider whether it's a good idea to take that quest after all, but they ultimately decide to just go with it anyway since if Yuka is with them, then they are sure everything will work out in the end. In that case, Yuka tells them all to get their items ready and to meet him an hour later in front of the stagecoach so they can head to the forest. Just then, the receptionist returns with the quest receipt, and all this seems a little too convenient, so he asks the receptionist if she planned things so they would end up like this, and she doesn't deny having some part in this. The stream Yuka made yesterday ended up earning him more than 10,000 fans, and they are all eager to see Yuka's next stream. Yuka is a little embarrassed since he hadn't realized his stream would earn him so much attention. He sees no harm in continuing to stream his fights since it'll bring attention to the girls. And if they happen to find that magical beast, having it on video would be great for the guild's records. While Yuka was talking about all this, a man from before is getting more and more infuriated, so as Yuka leaves the guild, he follows him. Yuka immediately realizes that he's being followed since the guy doing it is doing a terrible job at it, so he ducks into an alleyway to get away. He was hoping to lose his stalker, but for a fat guy, he's pretty quick and catches up to Yuka. Yuka asks him if he has any business with him, so the man demands that Yuka quit Clover immediately. Yuka obviously says that's not going to happen, especially since he's the leader of the party. The guy can't believe those girls would make Yuka their leader after just one day together, even though they offered to join their party $1 million, and they kept turning him down. Yuka understands what's going on here. This guy wanted to get himself a harem of cute adventurer girls, but Marina and the others refused to let him join, and now seeing another guy live his dream has made him irrational. The man draws his sword to attack if Yuka doesn't agree to leave the girls' party, so Yuka quietly casts a snare trap at the man's feet and then turns to walk away. As Yuka is walking away, the man really does try to attack him, but Yuka's trap causes him to slip and fall on the ground. Once he's on the carriage, he talks to the girls about his random encounter. They recognize the guy as Bizio and tell Yuka that the guy has been trying to join their party for so long. They ask if Yuka is alright since they would hate it if something bad were to happen to him because of them. But Yuka assures them it is not their fault, and besides, he left that guy unconscious in the middle of the street, so they can just report him when they get back to town. In the meantime, before they get to their destination, Yuka wants to go over their mission objective one last time. They are going to fetch 3 magic stones from the Orden Forest, and since the others say they've been here before, he asks them what it was like when they got here. According to Marina, they had been here 2 months ago, but now that she thinks about it, she didn't run into any monsters at all. After hearing this, Yuka realizes that the magical beast must have already been in the forest 2 months ago, and if they encounter it, he's going to be live streaming. This way, the guild gets valuable information about the beast, and in the event that they can't defeat it, it'll be easy to call for backup if needed. Once they arrive in the forest, Yuka begins the stream and the group starts making their way through the forest. Yuka decided to be the rear guard since beasts usually attack from behind, but Marina asks if it's really alright for him to be at the rear since he's in the most danger there. Yuka tells her she doesn't need to worry since not only can he use Blink Step to get away if his life really is in danger, his clothes also have really good defense stats, so he can take a couple of hits before he goes down. They soon reach the waterfall where they are meant to gather the magic stones, but just before they could reach there, Yuka tells everyone to wait because he can sense something coming. The magic beast finally reveals itself, but all the confidence Yuka had earlier goes about the window because that thing is a high-level monster that's usually only found in the deepest parts of the dungeon, a Zarnag. The girls are nowhere near strong enough to handle this thing or even survive a minute against it, so Yuka gets in front of them and tells Silk to lead the others back to the Adventurers Guild and get back up while he holds this thing off here. However, the girls know that Yuka doesn't stand a chance against that thing's either if he is fighting solo, so they refuse to leave his side, otherwise he might really die. Yuka can't really argue with that, so he agrees to have them fight with him, and cast his enchantment spells on them. He and Marina are handling the front line, so Marina charges forward first, but the Zarnag swats her away effortlessly. Yuka tries to use his layered status effects on it, and while it does disorient the Zarnag, it doesn't do much damage to it, so he's running low on options. Right now, there's only one thing in his arsenal that can stop this thing, so Yuka decides to go all or nothing. However, he will need Marina to buy him some time so he can finish casting the spell. Marina agrees to distract the beast so she gets up close to it, and does her best to keep its attention while dodging its attacks. And even when she's about to get caught, Silk and Rain assist with their magic. Thanks to their combined efforts, Yuka had enough time to finish casting the level 5 spell, a highly destructive prismatic missile, and now that it's complete, Yuka fires it straight at the beast's face. After the prismatic missile hits, it doesn't look like it did much at first, but soon after, a monster begins coughing up blood so it has been badly injured. Rain then casts a grade 5 Thunderbolt spell to electrocute the monster, and while it is paralyzed, Yuka orders Marina to chop its head off. Marina charges forward and activates her magic sword while Yuka buffs her with a critical attack spell, and as a result, she's able to cleave the monster's head from its body in one swing. Now that it's finally over, Yuka falls to his knees in relief because he can't believe they managed to defeat the monster without any of them dying, and back in town, all the spectators of the stream are equally as amazed, especially by the spell Yuka used because no one has seen anything like it before, but there's always got to be that one hater in the crowd. Back in the forest, Yuka is feeling a little lightheaded because of all the mana he had to use during the fight, but overall he's still in good condition. He's glad everything worked out, but that fight was way too tough for a group of newbies like them, and the only reason they managed to make it out alive was because they got lucky. He tells the girls that he's going to scold them later because of their reckless behavior, but the girls think Yuka was just as reckless as they were because he initially ran into battle alone, totally expecting to get himself killed, and that's unacceptable behavior. Yuka can't deny that he was prepared to sacrifice himself, so he compromises and says they can all talk about their grievances later. For now, they should probably wash themselves off since they are all covered in sweat and Marina is covered in Zarnag blood. While the girls bathe in the river, Yuka starts setting up camp, and this whole thing brings back fond memories from 6 months ago. Back then, Yuka was in charge of training Marina's team, and he was impressed with how well the girls were adjusting to the job of adventuring. But there were a few areas they could improve in. Marina was a little clumsy, Silk was overly cautious, and Rain was really timid. But despite all that, with how well they were performing, if it were up to Yuka, he would have given them their D-rank adventurer licenses right then. Later that night, the girls had set up their tent, prepared firewood and alarms in case of monster attacks. And as Yuka watched them work back then, he could feel a sense of pride because he knew they would turn out to be great adventurers in the future. But he never could have imagined that he would end up joining their party. A few days later, the party is back at the guild, and it looks like they've been summoned to meet the guild master, so the girls are a little nervous. They ask Yuka if this means they are in some kind of trouble, but he thinks this meeting is probably about the Zarnag they defeated. A mission like that should have been classified as B rank, however, for some reason it was marked as D rank, so some investigation is definitely warranted. Just then, the guild master, Benwood, walks in and the girls are so intimidated by his presence that they immediately stand at attention. He walks up to Yuka and demands that he explain himself, but Yuka did nothing wrong here, so he tells Benwood that he already provided all the relevant information in the report he wrote to the guild. Benwood isn't satisfied with an objective report, so he demands a detailed explanation, but before they discuss anything, Yuka tells Benwood to drop the tough guy act because it's scaring the girls. Marina tries to stop Yuka from talking to the guild master so casually since he is a really powerful person, but the guild master actually respects Yuka a lot, so there's no need for formalities between them. Benwood tells everyone they can sit down, and Benwood already knows what happened in the forest, but he wants to know what Yuka thinks about the whole situation. Yuka tells him that he suspects that this might have been the result of an overflow, causing a monster several levels stronger than usual to appear. Benwood agrees with Yuka's conclusion and immediately has his secretary issue an emergency investigation quest to get to the bottom of it. Both Yuka and Benwood seem to understand how serious overflows can be, but Marina has no idea what that is, so she asks Yuka for an explanation. Yuka tells her that an overflow is a phenomenon that occurs when a catalyst causes monsters in the dungeon to spill out. Usually, the monsters that live in the dungeon are bound there by the mana that flows in the ground, but sometimes those shackles can be broken, allowing the monster to escape the dungeon and terrorize the surrounding area. This could also be evidence of a possible dungeon stampede in the near future. The girls have heard about dungeon stampedes and the chaos they can cause as they tear through towns like a wildfire. And if monsters as strong as that Zarnag are appearing already, and they don't have much time, Benwood intends to investigate the matter thoroughly to ensure the safety of the people. But before that, he sincerely apologizes to the girls for putting them in such danger. The girls tell him he doesn't need to apologize since they all made it out alive. Although if they didn't have Yuka with them, they would have been goners. That said, even though Yuka did most of the heavy lifting, their live stream proved that the girls are capable fighters, so as a reward for doing so well against the Zarnag, Benwood intends to promote all of them to C rank. Although the promotion depends on the girls having Yuka's assistance since he is A rank. Yuka doesn't know what Benwood is talking about since he is only B rank, but that's when Benwood informs him that he is getting a promotion as well. Everyone who watched the livestream saw the high-level prismatic missile spell he used on the Zarnag, so it is abundantly clear that Yuka deserves a promotion, and starting today he will now be an A rank adventurer. Afterwards, Yuka and the girls head downstairs to have a drink and congratulate each other on their promotions. While they are all together, Yuka pulls out the bag of coins he got as the reward for their quest and gives it to Silk to count out. Silk opens the bag and she is shocked because she has never seen so many gold coins in one place before. Yuka explains that even though the quest was originally D rank because of the difficulty, it ended up being treated as a B rank quest, so the payout is a lot higher than it would have been otherwise. Silk puts all the coins on the table so she can start counting, but then she notices a piece of paper at the bottom of the bag and it has Yuka's name on it, so she gives it to him. Yuka opens it, and it turns out to be a note from Benwood, apologizing for everything Yuka had to go through. There's also a platinum coin in there as a little bonus for Yuka. Platinum coins are really valuable, so Yuka adds it to the party's funds, and after Silk finishes counting it all, She tells everyone that they have enough money to buy a house now. Marina is so excited to hear that she jumps up and accidentally knocks the coins over. Silk is glad they reached their financial goal as well, but she feels a little bad about it since the only reasons they got this much money was because of Yuka. While that may be true, Yuka tells Silk she doesn't have to think of it that way. They made him the leader of Clover, and it is natural for a leader to do whatever it takes to help out the group. As such, even if he played a major role in earning this money, it still belongs to all of them. The group continues to celebrate late into the night, and at one point, Rain asks Yuka if he has a dream he wants to accomplish. Yuka is caught off guard by the question, so he asks if there's a specific reason she's asking, and Rain explains that they've just reached their goal of purchasing a house thanks to Yuka, so she wants to know what Yuka's dream is so they can help him achieve it. Since she asks, Yuka tells her that his dream is to conquer the deepest floors of the Achromatic Darkness dungeon. As soon as the girls hear this, they spit up their drinks in surprise because the dungeon is quite literally the most dangerous one out there. It even possesses an Abyss Gate, an artifact known to be a direct gateway to the underworld. Yuka says the Abyss Gate is precisely why he wants to conquer the Achromatic Darkness, so Rain asks him if he intends to go through the Abyss Gate if he reaches it. However, Yuka explains that he just wants to see what the edge of this world looks like. An uncle of his once took on the dungeon and tried to get to the gate, and although he wasn't successful, Yuka was told the story so many times as a kid that he decided he wanted to try it himself. Although he knows that it will probably never happen, Marina likes the sound of Yuka's dream, so she suggests that they should all go to the Achromatic Darkness and try to accomplish Yuka's dream. Yuka tells her it's not that simple since that dungeon is so dangerous that just entering it requires permission from the government, and you'd have to be an A-rank party to gain approval. Even so, Rain still thinks it'd be a good idea, so she says she wants it to be their party's next goal. All the others agree and promise to work hard to make Yuka's dream a reality, but they won't be attempting it anytime soon though. With each passing day, Clover's streams have been gaining more and more popularity. Right now, they are streaming a battle against an undead hand, and thanks to their flawless teamwork, they are able to take it down with a lightning spell from Rain and a rock scroll from Yuka. That concludes the stream, so they wave to their fans, and everyone at the guild absolutely loves them, all except the members of Thunder Pike who hate how popular Yuka has become. Barry thinks Yuka only looks impressive because he is in a team of newbies, but Simon actually heard that Yuka recently got promoted to A rank, so he might just be that good. Besides, Yuka's popularity isn't their biggest concern right now. Thunder Pike has been constantly failing quests recently, and Simon thinks it's because all the new people they hire end up being useless morons. In fact, none of them ever end up sticking around for more than one day, but that can't be because there's something wrong with their team, right? Speaking of their team, Simon asks why Jamie isn't here, so Camilla explains that Jamie wasn't in the mood for a drink. Simon gets pissed since after that mission where Jamie got mauled by a wolf, she has been slowing the team down constantly. As for Jamie herself, she has locked herself in her room and has been watching videos of Yuka's live stream on repeat for hours now. The other members of Thunder Pike are starting to realize that Yuka may have been more useful than they gave him credit for. So since the reason Yuka quit in the first place was because of his low pay, they could just increase his cut a little. And since Jamie hasn't been doing much lately, they can cut her pay instead. A few hours later, Yuka and the others return to the guild to report the success of their mission. But as they arrive at the front door, they find Simon waiting there for Yuka. Seeing Simon again makes Yuka a little angry, so he tells the girls to head inside without him, and then he asks Simon what he wants. Simon gets to the point and says he is allowing Yuka the honor of rejoining Thunder Pike. Yuka can't believe the shit that just came out of Simon's mouth, but Simon tries to manipulate Yuka into considering it by reminding him that his dream to see the Abyss Gate can only come true if he's part of an A-rank party like Thunder Pike. Plus, ever since Yuka bailed on Thunder Pike, they've been struggling to complete quests, so Simon says it's Yuka's responsibility to come back and make things right. Yuka listened to everything Simon had to say, but it's too bad he doesn't care though. He and Simon may have been childhood friends. But that means nothing after all the disrespect Simon has given him, so Yuka wants nothing to do with him ever again. He then walks inside, leaving Simon to stew over the consequences of his actions, and meanwhile Bisio was watching the whole thing, and he seems to have a sinister idea in mind. Back inside, Yuka meets up with the girls and they ask him what happened with the guy outside. Yuka explains that was Simon, the leader of his former party, and as soon as Marina hears this, she gets worried because Yuka might end up rejoining Thunder Pike. But as Yuka stated earlier, nothing on Earth would ever make him go back to that shit show of a party. That aside, they still have to report their mission's success to the guild, so they all head to the reception desk and afterwards, they'll have drinks to celebrate. The next day, Yuka calls a meeting to tell the girls about a quest they received. Marina is already primed and ready to go, but Yuka tells her to sit down first and at least listen to what the quest is about. He tells them that their party has been specifically requested by Earthies. The girls are surprised since Earthy's is the most well-known workshop in the country. In fact, Silk's bow was made at Earthy's, so it's an honor to be specifically requested by them. However, the girls still wonder why Earthy's would choose Clover of all parties. Yuka explains that Earthy's is launching a new theme of equipment for ladies that is both stylish and safe, so they basically want Marina, Silk, and Rain to conquer a dungeon while wearing the new outfits in order to promote the brand. Marina can't believe they are really going to be poster girls for a brand as big as Earthy's, but Silk and Rain are already fixing their hair for the mission. It's a really good deal since they get paid to conquer a dungeon and get to keep the armor afterwards, so they tell Yuka they'll accept the offer, and the group later sets out for Iron Dungeon. When the day for the quest finally arrives, Yuka meets up with the girls outside the dungeon, and they've already changed into the new Earthy's gear. Yuka tells them they all look really cute, and on top of looking good, the equipment is all really functional, so he thinks it suits them. But for some reason, Rain seems to be upset with him, and he doesn't know why. The group enters the dungeon, and as they do, Yuka explains that this dungeon is relatively old and only has 4 floors, but at the bottom, there is an entrance to a separate dungeon, which is what they will be clearing. To get to the second dungeon's main entrance, Yuka says they are going to have to take the stairs, but those stairs are really long, so Marina asks if they can just climb down the middle with a rope to save time. Yuka tells her that normally she would be right, and people have tried doing that in the past, but this dungeon has a distortion field preventing you from going anywhere that isn't a designated path. He tells them to be careful not to get caught in the field, but then he notices that Rain still seems upset, so he asks her if he did something wrong. Rain doesn't say anything, but the others know why she's upset, so they tell Yuka to take a closer look at Rain's outfit. Yuka looks at Rain, trying to see if there's something he missed, and that's when he notices that she changed her ribbon bow color to blue instead of red today. Rain was upset that he hadn't complimented her on it, so Yuka tells her it looks good on her and she feels a lot better. They then head down to the second floor, and thanks to his lantern, Yuka spots a trap ahead, so he tells the girls to stand back while he takes care of it. He pulls out a long stick, and with it he taps the trap, causing several dozen spears to spring up from the ground, walls, and ceiling. That would have been an unpleasant way to die, but since he has already triggered it, it should be safe for them to continue forward now. They are going to have to squeeze through all the spears, so while walking, Yuka asks if anyone is having any trouble. Thankfully, since their new armor is so snug, the girls have no trouble passing through the spears. Once they make it a little farther down the corridor, Yuka senses something up ahead and warns the girls to get ready for battle. The group comes face to face with a group of orcs, and the second Silk sees the orcs, years of generational hatred comes flowing back into her mind. Yuka knows that orcs are the natural enemy of elves, but he asks Silk to remain calm so she doesn't make a mistake. Yuka plans to hit them with powerful magic first, then Marina will attack with her sword, and Silk can provide backup from the rear. Now that everyone knows the plan, Yuka casts his enchantment spells, and Rain begins casting a fireball spell. Once she's done, she shoots it at the orcs, setting them ablaze, so Yuka then joins in with a rock blast. While the orcs try to evade his rocks, Silk shoots one in the neck, and another was crushed, so there are only 2 left now. Marina charges in, and as the last 2 orcs charge forward, Yuka hits them with a paralyze and slow spell, allowing Marina to chop one clean in half, while the other gets shot in the neck by Silk. Marina then finishes it off by splitting the orc's head in half. Now that the battle is finally over, Yuka walks over to the orc corpses to pick up the magic stones and asks Silk if she was calmed down now. Silk apologizes for her outburst, but she can't help but be filled with rage whenever she sees an orc. Yuka understands that she can't control her reaction to orcs since it's just a part of being an elf. Just then, Marina comes up to Yuka and tells him she just found something weird on one of the orc's bodies. She hands it to him, and after inspecting it, Yuka realizes it's a Memorandum of Revelation scroll. It's an artifact that can uncover hidden abilities in people who use it. It's kind of odd that a low-ranked orc would have something like this, but in its current state, it's not that valuable since it's so damaged. However, it would be a waste to sell it off, so Yuka says he's going to fix it and let one of the girls use it. Silk asks what happens if one of them uses the scroll, so Yuka explains that it will unlock a hidden talent. For example, it might grant you a second job or maybe a new skill. If that's what the Revelation Scroll does, then Rain and Silk suggest that Marina should use it when it's repaired since she only has 1 job right now. Marina is a little hesitant to accept since sword mages are rare and she's not sure she has the potential to become one. Still, Yuka thinks it's worth a try anyway, since even if she doesn't get a second job, she might end up uncovering some sort of hidden ability. Just then, a chest appears as their reward for defeating the orc, and after opening it, they continue walking until they get to the break room between floors. The reward they got from the chest was a magic bag, so Rain is over the moon with joy since everyone said she could have it. Mostly because its magic bags are more useful to people in support roles. If they manage to find another one at some point, Yuka thinks it would be best if Silk got to have it since it would allow her to store more arrows. Once their break is over, they all get up, but before they continue, he wants to review the team's losses and gains. Yuka used one of his scrolls, but his mana levels are still decent, and Marina feels perfectly fine. Silk used 5 arrows when they fought against the orcs, but she's got 20 left, and as for Rain, she is ready to continue. Since everyone is still in good condition, they continue down to the 3rd floor, and Yuka warns everyone to stay alert since even though this floor doesn't have a floor boss, they have to be ready in case they get attacked. There used to be a door to the main dungeon, the abandoned city, but around 10 years ago, the door just vanished, so anyone can just walk in now. It is said that in the past, the door was guarded by multiple Shadow Stalkers, and from what Yuka knows, the Shadow Stalkers are supposed to look like solid black mannequins with shiny eyes. But those things haven't been seen in years, so there's no way they'd run into one here. However, there's a black mannequin with shiny eyes just staring at them menacingly from the 3rd floor, so Marina asks if they should be concerned about that. That thing is definitely a Shadow Stalker, and Yuka thinks it's unbelievable that they are actually seeing one here, so he makes sure the recorder gets a good view of it. The Shadow Stalker may look creepy, but they don't have to worry for now since it's on the 3rd floor, there's no way it can cross the distortion field. However, the Shadow Stalker proceeds to jump down and pierce through the distortion field like it's nothing, so they might be in trouble after all. Yuka tells everyone to get ready to fight and pulls out a scroll of multi-enchant to buff the girls as much as possible. But even with all the enchantments, when the Shadow Stalker launches its first attack, it takes Marina out in one hit. Rain rushes over to Marina's side to heal her while Silk provides cover, but Yuka still can't believe that the Shadow managed to shatter his multi-enchant barrier so easily. The Shadow prepared another attack, so Yuka charges forward and casts a protection barrier on himself, but the Shadow's attack easily shatters it, so Yuka comes to the conclusion that the Shadow's attack must be specifically made to destroy barriers, so he switches tactics and casts Blink Shadow on himself, so he can avoid being hit altogether and sneak up on the Shadow to slay it. However, before he could strike, the Shadow turns around and hits Yuka with a dark magic curse that leaves him immobilized, so there might really be no way to beat it. The Shadow then casts another curse, but Rain manages to block it with a holy shield, while Silk counterattacks with her Dryad Vines. While the Shadow is busy, Rain tries to heal Yuka like she did with Marina, but to her horror, she discovers that Yuka isn't breathing. At the same time, the Shadow slashes Silk across the back and Marina manages to chase it off, but it's moving way too quickly for her to hit it, so Rain decides to use a wide area spell to take it down. She casts Icicle Rain and aims it at the Shadow, but it disappears and slashes both Marina and Rain in the back. Now all the girls have been badly injured, but the Shadow isn't down yet because it then proceeds to cast dozens of Eclipse Cannons and fires them straight at the girls. This would have been the end of them, but at the last second, Yuka returns and casts a light shield over them. He covers the floor in 1,000 trip spells so the Shadow can't get away, and then he begins spamming every possible debuff effect he can cast to weaken it, while also casting buffs on the girls to heal them. Now that the girls are back in fighting shape, Silk traps the Shadow in her vines, granting Rain enough time to cast her Undead spell to erase the Shadow. The battle is finally over and Marina is so glad that Yuka is still alive that she gives him a big hug, but Yuka tells her that her hug is bringing him dangerously close to dying again. Once Marina lets go of him, Yuka thanks her, because if she hadn't spotted the Shadow Stalker when she did, it might have gotten them with a surprise attack, and that would have been a guaranteed death sentence for them. He then asked Rain what she thought of the Shadow, so Rain says it was undead, but its mana was in disarray, so it felt like the Shadow's existence shouldn't have been possible. Furthermore, it shouldn't have been able to pass through the distortion field, so in all likelihood, it must have been the result of a dungeon overflow. Silk asks Yuka what he thinks they should do, and since they are already at the bottom floor, he suggests that they should at least finish their quest before they head back up. In that case, Marina asks if they should inform everyone of the Shadow Stalker with a stream, but Yuka would rather not since they are wearing Earthy's unreleased equipment line, so he doesn't want to show it to the public without permission from the client. Yuka suggests they finish the quest quickly so they can get out of here, so they keep moving and head down to the corridor. There, they find the door that leads to the abandoned city, and according to the legends, people once lived in there. However, their quest only requires them to make it to the gate, not enter, so once they touch it, they turn around and head back to the surface. After returning, Yuka makes his report to the guild, and once he is done, he meets up with the girls who are waiting outside. Silk asks him how it went, so Yuka tells her he submitted the footage they recorded and told the guild about the Shadow Stalker. The guild will likely want to interview them about it later, so Yuka suggests they should take the next 2 days off and stay in Qualto. Marina likes the sound of that, so she asks Yuka if he'd like to go on a date with all of them. Silk isn't familiar with the city, so she was hoping Yuka would show her around, and Rain wants to see all the artifacts this city has to offer. Yuka sees no reason to reject their offer, so he agrees to go on a date with them. Thunder Pike continues going on adventures to try and maintain their status as an A-rank party, but Barry has been complaining a lot about their rations because they always used to get good food from Yuka when he was around. Simone tells him there's no use in complaining about it now, so he suggests they keep going and asks everyone if they still have enough mana and potions. Barry tells him he didn't buy any potions because why would he waste his money on healing potions when he can just have Camilla heal him instead? But Camilla doesn't have infinite mana, you know. Simone tells them to stop arguing and asks Jamie to get their stream up and running so they can continue. While she's working on it, Barry starts calling her weak and useless for no reason, and the others join in on it. They've been on an uncontrollable downward spiral lately, and since Yuka isn't around for them to blame their problems on, they've started taking it out on Jamie, and there's nothing she can do about it. Well, this mission was yet another failure. As they return to the guild, Mamar tells them that if they keep failing missions like this, then there's a chance they may be demoted. She tells Simon that his party might be better off accepting quests that are a little easier so they can actually complete it this time. And personally, she suggests they should aim for C-rank quests next time. Simon is outraged that she would say such a thing to an A-rank adventurer, but she tells him he hasn't been producing any A-rank results, so he won't be getting special treatment. Simon once again tries to blame his shortcomings on others and says it's the guild's fault for not introducing them to someone he can manipulate into doing the heavy lifting for the team. But Mamar doesn't give a damn about his excuses and sends him away. With nothing else to do, Thunder Pike sits at a table to brood, but Jamie sits at his separate table because she doesn't get along with the others so well anymore. Barry is still angry that Mamar would threaten to demote them, but Simon calms him down because Mamar was right about them. They haven't been performing as well as they used to, so maybe A-rank missions are a little too much for them to handle right now with just the 4 of them. However, if Simon thinks their lack of a 5th member is a problem, then Camilla tells him to hurry up and find a new member for their party since that's his job as the leader. Simon knows Camilla is right, but even if he finds someone else, there's no way he would get someone as good as Yuka was, so Barry asks him if they can just bring Yuka back to Thunder Pike. However, Simon already tried that and Yuka turned him down, so if he's going to bring Yuka back, then he's going to have to do something to convince him to ignore the past few years of gaslighting he had to endure. That's why Simon suggests that they should take a mission in the Achromatic Darkness dungeon, since it has always been Yuka's dream to conquer it, because he wanted to find an abyss gate. Simon thinks they can lure Yuka back into their party if they pretend that they are interested in clearing the dungeon, since only A-rank parties are allowed to go in there, so there's no way Yuka could do it with the newbie girls in his party. Barry thinks this is a great idea, so he agrees with Simon's plan, and Jamie is just wondering how she ended up stuck with a bunch of idiots like them. Meanwhile, Yuka and the girls are heading out in town, and while walking to their destination, Yuka tells them that he heard the Iron Dungeon was temporarily closed for an investigation, although it shouldn't be surprising since a Shadow Stalker did show up for the first time in 10 years. As they continue walking down the street, they eventually find the man they are here to meet, and he takes them to inspect a house that they are interested in buying. Monday shows them around, and the house looks pretty good, but Yuka doesn't think it's right for them since ground floor homes are easy targets for burglary, and it's hard to stop people from looking in through the windows, which is a major privacy concern since the girls will be living here. In that case, Monday offers to show them a different property and leads the group to a second house. This one was newly remodeled into a family home and has private bedrooms on the 2nd floor, along with an underground storage space and roof access. Marina thinks this place is great and Yuka likes it too, but he still hasn't made a decision on it yet, so he asks Monday if he could put a hold on this house for a little while. Monday says he will keep the house on the market in case Yuka decides to buy it, but for now, he has one last property to show them. Yuka and the others follow him to the next house, but as they walk, Yuka starts feeling a bit uneasy. Ray notices this, so she asks Yuka if something is wrong, and he tells her it's not a huge deal, but Thunder Pike's base is near here, so he's a little worried he might run into them while he's here. As soon as the girls hear this, they tell Monday they don't want to see the last house. They don't want to risk living in the same neighborhood as Thunder Pike, so it could be a 7-story mansion for all they care. They don't want it. Marina suggests they just buy the last house they saw since that one was pretty good, and Yuka agrees, so that same day, they get everyone's stuff moved over to the new house. Yuka says he will help the girls put their stuff in the house, so he asks if they decided which rooms they want, but they were actually waiting for Yuka to choose his room first. Yuka is confused, so he asks them if they are saying they want him to live with them, and that's exactly what the girls are saying since this is meant to be a party base after all. And it's all thanks to Yuka that they could even afford to buy the house in the first place, so of course they want him to live with them. Yuka is hesitant to live under the same roof as the girls, But Marina reminds him that when they camp out on their adventures, Yuka has no problem sleeping right next to them, so this shouldn't be any different. It's hard to argue with that logic, so Yuka agrees to move in, but he's setting some ground rules. He tells the girls to keep in mind that he's a man, so they have to actually use their door locks when they are changing their clothes or something. He just really doesn't want to get forced into embarrassing situations, and as long as they all respect each other's privacy, there shouldn't be any issues. With that settled, they sit down at the lunch table to eat and toast to their future as Clover. However, Yuka notices that Rain is a little distracted, so he looks at the TV, and to his surprise, he sees a report about a party taking on the Achromatic Darkness dungeon. The announcer talks about how Thunderpike receives permission from the guild to perform an investigation in the Achromatic dungeon, and they apparently teamed up with another party, all with the aim of reaching the Abyss Gate. Hearing that Thunderpike is going after his dream is a massive slap in the face to Yuka, and the girls think he must be really upset, but he actually says he is fine. After all, it's not like it's a race, and if he's going to take on the Achromatic dungeon, he wants to do it with Clover. And he couldn't care less if Thunderpike wants to do it before him. He wants to just forget about them and continue with their meal, but then he gets some mail from the guild saying he is being summoned. He and Rain go to see what this is about, and they are informed the party has specifically requested Yuka's help on an upcoming mission of theirs. Yuka is curious about the request at first, but then he sees that it is from Thunderpike, so he immediately rejects it and goes on with his day. However, a couple minutes later, Simon is informed that Yuka declined the request, so he goes out of his way to track Yuka down and demand an explanation. Yuka was expecting something like this to happen, so he turns to face Simon, and Simon demands to know what reason Yuka had for rejecting their request. Yuka tells him there's no special reason behind his decision, he simply doesn't want to work with Thunderpike under any circumstances, even if it's for his dream. He's honestly surprised that Simon even remembered that his dream was to find an Abyss Gate, but he has no plans on getting involved, so he wishes Simon the best of luck on his mission. Simon tries to guilt Yuka into reconsidering by saying he already started making preparations around Yuka's participation, but that sounds like a Simon problem, so why should he care? In the first place, it was incredibly rude to send a spot request to someone who is already in an active party, and as long as it is a request, Yuka has every right to refuse for whatever reason he chooses. Simon gets angry and tells Yuka he is in the wrong for abandoning Thunderpike, but Yuka is at his limit and yells back that Simon is the one in the wrong here. While Yuka was in Thunderpike, everything from pre-quest preparations, quest research, and even intel gathering was dumped on Yuka's shoulders, and not once did Simon show any gratitude for all the work he put in. All Simon ever did was use him, so as far as Yuka is concerned, they are no longer friends. Simon is stunned and asks Yuka what he is supposed to do now, since if Thunderpike fails another quest, they'll be demoted. Again, that's not Yuka's problem to deal with, so he takes Rain's hand and walks away. 2 weeks later, Yuka meets with the guild master and got some bad news to share. It looks like a dungeon overflow really is occurring because in addition to what happened to Yuka's party in Ion, there have been several other incidents around the country. Given the circumstances, the Royal Academy couldn't deny the possibility of a dungeon stampede, which is likely why they granted Thunderpike permission to investigate the Achromatic Darkness. With that said, Benwood wants to nominate Yuka and the rest of Clover for an investment quest in the Achromatic Darkness. Yuka immediately tells Benwood he can't accept the quest, because there's no way a C-rank party like Clover can do a job like this. Besides, even if Thunderpike isn't reliable, there are other A-rank parties included in the Achromatic Dungeon investigation. However, Benwood tells him that the other parties have gotten fed up with Thunderpike's tricks and backed out of the mission. In fact, it looks like Thunderpike never actually intended to go on the mission because they haven't even submitted a formal application for the mission. Ben then pulls out a logbook and shows it to Yuka, but Yuka already knows exactly what this is, because it is the only conquest log of the last mission into the Achromatic Dungeon, and in it there is proof that the Abyss Gate exists. That's exactly why Ben wants Yuka to do the investigation, because he is passionate about the Abyss Gate, and if it's him, any reports he makes can be completely trusted. He isn't asking Yuka to conquer the entire dungeon, he just wants him to take a look inside. But to do that, Yuka would have to fight his way through the dungeon, and he thinks that would be too risky. Benwood understands his concerns, which is why he is willing to give Yuka this for the quest. It is a scroll of exit, and with it, Yuka can leave the dungeon instantly whenever he wants, so Benwood asks Yuka to reconsider. Just then, Memar comes in and hands Yuka the formal request form for this mission, and it says he will be joining a party called King of Humilia, and his party will be granted provincial A-rank status for the duration of the mission. This is starting to sound like a really big deal, so Yuka says he needs to talk to his party members about it before making a decision. After getting home, Yuka tells the girls about the request and tells them that he is actually thinking of turning it down. The girls are surprised that he would reject such a huge opportunity, and Yuka understands that participating would be a great boost for their party, but he doesn't think they are ready for it. There's still a ton of experience and preparations they are missing, but while they can't do much about their lack of experience, Silk tells Yuka that they can still make the necessary preparations before the mission begins. Rain asks Yuka if he's scared for some reason, and Yuka hadn't thought about it till now, but he really is scared. He is worried that he might lose the girls if they take on a dangerous mission like this, because that's the last thing he would want to happen. The girls feel the same way about him, but they promise to do everything they can to make sure they come back from the mission safely, so Yuka can trust them to handle themselves. Yuka realizes he was being overly cautious and apologizes to the girls for not believing in them. They all agree to take on the achromatic dungeon together, and later that day the group heads back to the guild to tell Benwood that they are accepting the quest, but they talked it over and they may need an extra person, so they ask if he can introduce them to a good scout. Mamar has expected something like this, so she already has someone lined up. This is Neen, and she's the daughter of one of Mamar's friends, but after one too many pranks, she got banned from her homeland. So Mamar took her in and helped her change her life around. Neen introduces herself as a former Fursi thief, but now she is a C-rank ninja, and she promises to make herself useful to the team, so she asks to be hired as their scout. Since the team is ready, Benwood and Mamar lead them down into the guild basement where the entrance to the achromatic dungeon is hidden. Silk is surprised because she never expected the dungeon entrance to be right below the guild. Mamar explains that the Adventurers Guild was built on top of the achromatic dungeon as a protective measure to seal off its entrance. But that aside, before Yuka and the others head inside, there's something Benwood wants to inform him of. The other A-rank party that was meant to come on this investigation actually backed out at the last minute, so Thunder Pike is the only party in there right now. He knows how Yuka feels about Thunder Pike, so he thought he should give him a warning, since he might end up running into them. And speaking of Thunder Pike, the guild is currently investigating them for fraud since there have been allegations that Simon is squandering the funds meant for the mission. In any case, he just asks that Yuka try to keep things friendly if he does run into Thunder Pike, because they can't have adventurers fighting amongst themselves in the dungeon. With that, the dungeon gate is opened and the group gets ready to begin their investigation. But before they walk in, Benwood reminds them that their job is just to look around, so they don't need to go out of their way to defeat monsters or clear the dungeon. Yuka and the others say they understand, so they begin their live stream and address all their viewers. Yuka greets everyone and tells them that today Clover will be heading into the achromatic dungeon for the very first time, and they will be streaming every second of it. Since Neen is the scout, Yuka gives her the lantern and a compass artifact to lead the way, and it's making her job a lot easier. She tells the group that there are no monsters in sight, and the wind compass is blowing in this direction, so she puts on an invisibility cloak and runs ahead to go check it out. While Neen is gone, Silk asks Yuka how he feels about finally exploring the achromatic dungeon, but to be honest, he's not as excited as he thought would be. Although the mission is just getting started, so Marina is sure it'll be more fun later on. Silk, on the other hand, says she's really excited to be here. She initially became an adventurer solely for the money, but after hearing Yuka talk about his dream, she became fascinated by the idea of adventuring to fulfill a dream. A little while later, Neen returns and she says she has confirmed the route they should take, but this place is really weird. The route Neen was talking about is this door floating in the middle of a forest, so Yuka and the others walk through and head deeper into the dungeon. While they are walking, Yuka mentions that he heard that Thunder Pike entered the dungeon 2 weeks ago, and they are currently on the 8th floor, so there's not much chance of them running into each other for now. Yuka reminds the girls that their objective is just to find out if there's anything odd about the dungeon, not to clear it, so it would be best to avoid all battles if possible. However, they soon find their path blocked by a strange fish monster, and there's no way around it, so it looks like they are going to have to fight after all. Yuka has never seen anything like this creature before, so he's not taking any chances and starts forming an attack strategy. He tells Rain to get Compact Fire spell ready and asks Silk to fire her arrows at the monster's head. As for Marina, he wants her to use this. She normally attacks with a sword, but Yuka wants to finish the monster off as quickly as possible, so the crossbow is the best option. Marina is a little disappointed since she was hoping to use her sword after getting a new samurai job, but a crossbow is cool too. Now that everyone is clear on the plan, Yuka goes all out and begins casting his prismatic missile spell, so just as the monster begins charging, he shoots it, followed up by a crossbow bolt from Marina, creating a hole in its chest. Rain then launches her flame spell straight into the hole in the monster's chest, causing it to burn up from the inside, and Silk finishes it off with a few arrows to the head. Neen is amazed by how quickly they were able to take the monster down, and now that it has been defeated, the team can move on to the safe room. Once they get to the safe room, Yuka says they should take a break and cuts the stream. He asks everyone to report their losses, but aside from the arrows that were used to fight the shark monster, everyone is still fully equipped. Yuka is glad to hear that everyone is in good condition, so that just leaves one more thing to deal with: the treasure chest. They are obviously going to open it, but Yuka is debating whether they should stream it or not. Silk points out that if there ends up being valuable loot in that chest, people might get upset about a C-rank party like them getting it. She makes a good point, so Yuka says they should open the chest off-camera and gives Ning the go-ahead to pick the lock. She does as instructed, and while picking the lock, she discovers that there's a trap built into it, but that's not an issue since she is skilled enough to avoid it. Nan eventually gets the chest open, and they are all amazed to see that it is full of beautiful gems, so Yuka tells Silk to hold onto the jewels and gold for now. She starts putting them into her magic bag, and once she's done, Yuka takes a look inside to see if there are any artifacts. No idea why they left some jewels in the chest, but Yuka finds a ring artifact that looks really promising, as well as this Q thing. He's a bit confused since his appraisal didn't give him any information about the artifact, but that's because the artifact has no attributes yet. It sounds interesting, so Yuka intends to report its existence to Benwood before trying to use it, but as for the ring, he thinks it would be great for Rain since it's an artifact that keeps its user calm. And it's clearly already working since she only slightly freaked out over Yuka getting down on one knee and putting a ring on her finger. They continue making their way through the dungeon, and before long, Ning is able to track down the second-floor staircase. Yuka tells her she's doing a great job as their scouter, but Ning tells him it's all thanks to the wind compass artifact he let her borrow. It allows her to find the staircase by following the air currents in the dungeon. Yuka is a bit surprised since he thought everyone used similar artifacts to traverse the dungeon, but he just has so many that it seems normal to him. Once they make it into the second-floor safe room, Yuka asks everyone to state all the strange things they've seen so far. Silk mentions that the scenery seems to have changed in some locations, and then there's that shark head thing, but most intriguing of all is the fact that they found a treasure chest in the first-floor safe room. That made no sense to him because treasure chests are usually only located in the deeper floors, and the value of the items found in the chest is directly proportional to the danger of the floor. So the fact that they found all those gems along with 2 valuable artifacts doesn't add up. All of this is more than enough reason to warrant suspicion, and just to be safe, they probably shouldn't risk going too deep for now, so Yuka suggests they should turn back for the day. This mission has been a great success since they managed to investigate quite a bit, found some interesting artifacts, and suffered no losses whatsoever, but unfortunately, Yuka's good mood is ruined because he ends up running into Thunderpike. He had really hoped he wouldn't have to see their faces ever again, and it's clear they haven't changed one bit because Simone, Barry, and Camilla all start berating him for being ungrateful, while Jamie stands at the back and tries not to get involved with her other teammates' tantrum. Simone then approaches Yuka and says that since Clover is down here, he's going to be nice and form an alliance with them, so he demands that Yuka hand over all the data and valuable loot he got during his expedition. Yuka can't believe the sheer audacity of Simone to think he would agree to something like that. But Barry smugly points out that Yuka's party is C-rank, so it's natural for them to team up with an A-rank party, and Yuka should be grateful that they are even offering. The live stream is still going on, so all of Yuka's viewers see him and Simone arguing, and they can already tell something interesting is about to happen. Simone continues spouting his BS and also demands that Yuka give him all the credit for any information he gathered. Yuka is getting tired of listening to Simone's stupidity, but before he could say anything, Silk beats him to it. She calls Simone shameless for trying to take advantage of others, but Simone, Barry, and Camilla are discriminatory against dark elves, so they call her a filthy follower of the dark god and say a savage like her has no right to speak in their presence. That was the last straw for Yuka, because they can disrespect him all they want, but if they insult a member of his precious family, then someone's going to die today. Simone tries to downplay his and the others' blatant racism, but Yuka was dead serious about his threat, and he tells them that he would sooner die than ever work with them again. He doesn't want to spend even another second near Simone, so he tells everyone in Clover that they are leaving and turns to walk away, leaving the 3 narcissists furious, and Jamie is really uncomfortable. And remember, all it was caught on Yuka's livestream, so a lot of people just saw Thunderpike act openly racist, and it's only a matter of time before they get cancelled. 2 days later, Thunderpike is called into a meeting with Benwood, and he tells them that several complaints have been lodged against Thunderpike in the past few days. One is from their sponsors, claiming that Thunderpike is misusing the funds that were allocated to them for the mission, 2 civil rights complaints from the Council of Elves and Wellmelia for being openly racist towards Silk, and 1 from the guild's headquarters. Benwood asks if Simone has anything to say for himself, but unfortunately, common sense was in short supply when Simone was born, so he says he did nothing wrong. If anything, he thinks Clover was in the wrong for allowing their filthy savage elf to speak to him like that, but before he even finishes that sentence, Simon receives a well-deserved punch to the face. Benwood is furious that Simon is so remorseless, but Simon doesn't understand why Benwood is making a big deal out of this single savage elf. Benwood throws a dagger near Simon's face to shut him up, and since Simon is clearly too ignorant to figure it out on his own, Benwood breaks it down for him. An A-rank party recognized by the Kingdom of Humiliated was just seen being openly racist towards a dark elf, and that has sullied the dignity of the kingdom. Simon thinks Benwood is overreacting over a little argument between adventurers, but Benwood grabs him by the neck and tells him his little argument may end up damaging the kingdom's relationship with the elves. So here's what's going to happen. Benwood wants Simon and the others to make an apology stream immediately, and he had better be prepared to lose his adventurer's license as well, or maybe even be exiled from the kingdom altogether. Simon is starting to realize how serious this actually is, so he tries to bargain by saying there will be no one to complete the achromatic dungeon investigation if Benwood exiles them, but Benwood tells him that he will be just fine without them. Unlike Thunderpike, Clover has proved themselves to be capable of handling themselves and working together in dangerous situations, and while they are on the mission, they have been provisionally granted A-rank status. Simon is left speechless upon realizing that Clover is A-rank. Benwood doesn't want to waste any more time talking to Simon, so he tells him to get out of his office and start working on that apology stream. Simon can't believe this is happening to him, and he has no intention of apologizing for what he did either because he doesn't think he did anything wrong. Instead, he blames Yuka because all this happened because of his stream, so he wants to get his revenge. Just then, someone calls out to Simon from around the corner, and he says he has a plan to get Simon back on top, while getting revenge on Yuka and Clover, and Simon seems interested in what he has to say. The next day, Marina meets with Yuka because she figured something out about that baby artifact they found. She knows what to do, but she needs Yuka's help to make it work, so she tells him to hold onto it while thinking of her, and as he does this, the black box transforms into a black samurai sword. Yuka is amazed because even he didn't know that was possible, so he asks Marina to explain how it works, but she says it's a secret. A few days later, Benwood meets with Clover as they are about to head into the achromatic darkness once again. He reminds them that they don't have to try to accomplish anything since the information they brought back on their first expedition was more than enough. Yuka assures him that they will be careful in there, and if anything goes wrong, he's going to use the scroll of exit to bail out immediately. They begin their live stream and tell all their viewers that they will be going on their second expedition into the achromatic darkness today, and their goal is to reach the staircase of the 3rd floor while looking for strange things. The expedition has been going smoothly so far as the group makes it to the 1st floor staircase without much trouble, but as they head up the 2nd floor, they find something none of them were expecting: a wide open field. The girls find it hard to believe that they are still inside a dungeon when they can clearly see the sky, but Yuka remembers seeing records of some dungeon floors that look like outdoor areas, so this isn't that strange. The only point of concern for him is that outdoor floors usually only appear around the 20th floor, but they are currently on the 2nd floor, so this isn't normal. Yuka thinks the dungeon layout must have changed, so he would like to get a better look at their surroundings, but unfortunately, he didn't bring a telescope with him. Luckily, Rain knows a telescopic vision spell, so Yuka lifts her up onto his shoulders so she can take a look around. Rain looks out into the distance, and at first, she doesn't see anything, but then she spots a little house on the other side of the field. Since it's the only thing they spotted in this field, Yuka and the others start heading towards the house, but as they walk, Silk asks him if it's normal for there to be houses in a dungeon. Yuka knows ruins are often found in dungeons, but this is the first time he has ever encountered a full house, so he's not sure what to expect from this. And the fact that there's a sun here only adds to his worries, because if there's daytime, then that means it will become nighttime at some point, and his gut is telling him they don't want to be out here when night falls. The group soon arrives at the house, and now that they get a closer look, it looks like it's newly built, and that raises the question of who would build a house in a dungeon. Just then, an old woman comes out of the house, and she says she's so glad to have visitors, so she invites them all inside to have some tea and pie. Yuka is immediately put on edge because there's no way an old lady could survive in a dungeon all by herself, so he may not know what's going on, but he knows he wants no part in it. Marina asks the old lady who she is and why she's in the dungeon, and the lady says she will explain, but first she invites them all to come inside and rest a little. Yuka knows a trap when he sees one, so he tells her they are not going anywhere near that house. And seeing that Yuka won't fall for her trick, the old lady reveals her true form. The sky suddenly turns dark and the house begins to expand right before their eyes. The old lady has now become a beautiful young lady, and she's a little disappointed that Yuka didn't step into her house, but she's also impressed that he instinctively knew it was a bad idea. Yuka wasn't sure before, but now he knows exactly what's going on and who he is dealing with. That woman is Lady Persephone, and she is the goddess who reverses life and death. Persephone is even more impressed that Yuka knows about her, but if he knows who she is, then he must know that he stands no chance of winning against her, so she will have him entertain her for the rest of eternity. Yuka is well aware they can't win a fight against Persephone, but he does know of a trick that might get them out of this alive, so he gets down on one knee and says he would like to meet Persephone again when his time on this world comes to an end. That must have been the secret code, because Persephone suddenly no longer intends to capture them, but she tells Yuka she won't forget his promise and places a curse on him. Black letters suddenly appear on Yuka's face, and he feels immense pain, but he doesn't have time to worry about that because they all need to get back to the staircase immediately. He casts physical enchantments on all of them so they can run faster, and while they run, he tells the others that the woman back there was Lady Persephone, meaning this place must be the land of death. And no matter what, they can't let the darkness catch up to them. They make it back to the staircase in time, but being in the land of death for so long drained a ton of Yuka's mana, so he can't use any recovery magic. The girls then notice the mark on Yuka's face, so they hand him a mirror, and he recognizes it as the mark of Persephone. Rain would like to help him get rid of it, but she isn't strong enough to do so, so Yuka is going to have to go to a temple when they get back to town. But for now, they take a break to eat and discuss what just happened. Yuka tells the others that he has read stories of the time an adventurer named Rimazurka wandered into the Grey Field. That's how he knew about the phrase that got Persephone to let them go, but he's not sure how it worked or what consequences there may be. As the others may have guessed by now, that was a different realm entirely. One where the cycle of life and death repeats endlessly under the rule of Lady Persephone. Yuka has always wondered if an abyss gate really linked worlds together, and it looks like he finally has his answer. He believes the achromatic dungeon recreates versions of the worlds it is connected to, but even if that's the case, they are still only on the second floor, so something like that shouldn't be happening here. Yuka thinks about it for a second, and he realizes they may not be on the second floor after all. He remembers reading some records of the Vanguard conquering something similar to this floor once before, meaning this must be the 30th floor. That means the staircases are transporting them to random floors in the dungeon. If the floors of the dungeon are really being skipped somehow, then there's no telling what else could happen. So Yuka thinks it might be a good idea to use the exit scroll to leave immediately, but Silk tells him to wait. His mana is still drained from his encounter with Persephone, so using the scroll now would put too much strain on them. The girl suggests they should stay in the safe room for a little while longer, at least until they've all recovered. And since that's what they want, Yuka agrees. They all go to sleep, but by the time Yuka opens his eyes, he finds himself tied up with Simon standing over him. He questions why Simon of all people is here, but Simon says he simply followed Yuka and the others here. Yuka demands to know what he wants, but Simon tells him to calm down unless he's fine with the girls getting hurt. Camilla only cast a sleep spell on them for now, so they are still okay. But they received a slave collar from someone who has a major grudge against Yuka, and while Rain is wearing it, she will be forced to obey any commands Simon gives, even if it's to kill her friends. Yuka tells Simon that if he goes through with this, he's going to be branded a criminal, but Simon is already about to get exiled from the kingdom, so he's a loser with nothing left to lose. With that said, Simon says he is willing to let the girls go, but only if Yuka does something for him in exchange. He pulls out a statement and tells Yuka to sign it as proof that he acknowledges everything on it is true. The statement says that all the racist comments about elves were started by Clover, Thunderpike did nothing wrong, and all that furry hentai on Simon's computer was Yuka's doing. Yuka can't believe what he's reading, and he says he would never sign something like that, but Simon threatens to use the slave collar to force Rain to do something very inappropriate if he doesn't, so Yuka has no choice. Simon then begins beating Yuka up out of anger at everything he has had to endure since Yuka quit the party. But Barry reminds him not to accidentally kill Yuka, because he can't sign the document if he's dead. Simon realizes he's right, but he still wants to make Yuka suffer, so he tells him he's going to order Rain to kill Silk and make Yuka watch the whole thing. Yuka begs him not to do it and says he will sign the document, so Simon gets in front of him and brings out a quill for Yuka to sign with. Jamie stands in the back looking guilty for what her teammates are doing, but she's not getting a pass after letting things get this far. Yuka is just about to sign the document, but all of a sudden they feel a massive earthquake happen. The earthquake soon passes, so Simon tells Yuka to hurry up and sign the paper already, but Yuka is still worried about that earthquake that just hit. This is a safe room, so if an earthquake reaches here, then it's a clear sign that the dungeon is destabilizing. Simon thinks Yuka is just making stuff up to stall for time, but a few seconds later, the floor collapses beneath his feet, sending Simon, Barry, and Camilla falling into an abyss. The rest of the floor is going to give out soon, so Yuka tries to wake the girls up so they don't die from the fall, but they are still out cold. Yuka tries pulling out the scroll of exit so they can escape the dungeon immediately, but Simon must have taken his magic bag while he was asleep, so he doesn't have any of his artifacts. The floor soon gives out entirely, so Yuka and the others are sent falling to their doom. But fortunately, midway through the fall, Jamie casts a feather-falling spell that allows them all to land safely. All except Simon, Camilla, and Barry. Those guys are hurt badly, and they deserve every bit of the pain. Simon yells at Jamie for helping Yuka instead of him, but they've got bigger problems to deal with because a ton of orcs have surrounded them, and they have no way out. Jamie runs over to Simon and grabs Yuka's magic bag to return it to him. And once he has his bag back, he pulls out the scroll of sanctuary to cast a barrier while Jamie undoes the sleep spell Camilla cast on the girls. Once the girls are awake, Rain takes over barrier duty to buy Yuka enough time to use the scroll of exit and get all of them out of here. Yes, even Thunderpike too. Jamie asks if he's sure since he has every right to leave her and the rest of Thunderpike down here to die. But even if what they did was downright evil, Yuka doesn't want to let them die in a dungeon. Unfortunately, Yuka underestimated just how short-sighted Simon can be because while Rain was maintaining the barrier, he decides to take her hostage. As a result, the barrier goes down, so the others are forced to fight the orcs to keep them away. Yuka wants to help, but he can't do anything while he's stuck in the scroll activation state, so Simon might actually kill Rain. Luckily, Jamie runs up from behind Simon and knocks him to the ground to save Rain. The scroll is about to activate, so Yuka yells for Jamie to come over to his side so she can teleport out of here with them. But before she could move, Simon elbows Jamie in the face and starts walking over to the teleportation circle. Barry and Camilla plead with him to carry them to the circle too because they can't move, but Simon doesn't care about them anymore, so he's fine leaving them behind. However, before he could get to Yuka, Jamie lasers him through the knee to stop him from getting to Yuka. Yuka calls out to her again because the scroll is about to activate, but there's no way she'll make it in time, so she just smiles and accepts her fate as Yuka, and the others teleport away. Simon begins to panic after realizing that he's out of options, so he pulls out his last resort and stabs himself in the neck with some sort of injection as the orcs close in. Even though she's stuck in the dungeon, Jamie has managed to survive for now, but she won't last much longer, so she turns on the stream camera so she can leave a final message. First, she recounts how Yuka was always so nice to her and would even help her get medicine for her brother. But she never paid him back for any of it because she never realized how expensive it was. She only came to understand how hard Yuka worked to help them after he had quit the party, and she feels disgusted with herself for it. She knows Yuka will never forgive her, and she honestly doesn't think she deserves forgiveness for what she did to him. Just then, Jamie hears Simon angrily yell out her name, and she can't let him find her, so she sends out a recording of all of Thunderpike's crimes and apologizes to Yuka for everything she did. Yuka and the others just finished watching the stream, and it definitely sounded like Jamie has already accepted her fate. Yuka feels terrible for leaving Jamie to die in that dungeon, but Rain assures him that it wasn't his fault. It's hard to imagine that Jamie could have survived long down there by herself, but Benwood tells them that the guild actually received a distress signal from the dungeon recently. The message is full of static, but they clearly recognize Jamie's voice, so she must still be alive down there. However, the guild officials are still debating whether it is worth sending a rescue team down to save her because the achromatic dungeon is extremely dangerous. Yuka immediately gets up and says he will volunteer for the rescue mission because he can't leave a friend to die down there. He also asked Benwood to help him find another scroll of exit and says he's willing to pay for it no matter how much it costs. Benwood agrees to help him look, but he tells Yuka that it still hasn't been decided whether the rescue mission will be allowed. As Benwood walks off, Yuka tells the girls that he will go on the rescue mission alone so he doesn't put them in danger, but the girls refuse to allow it because they know Yuka is going to end up doing something reckless if he goes alone. Besides, if it weren't for Jamie, they all might have died in the dungeon, and after they put that slave collar on Rain, she would have been doomed to a life of servitude without Jamie's help. Speaking of the slave collar, Yuka asks Rain to come over to him for a second, and when she does, he starts casting a spell with the cursed mark he received, and he is able to disable the slave collar. Rain is amazed because slave collars are nearly impossible to remove once they are on. She asks Yuka what spell he just used, so Yuka tells her it's probably dark magic. He isn't sure exactly why he knows it, but it seems like new skills and spells are being forced into him by the mark of Persephone. This probably makes him a disciple of the No-Life King now, so Yuka jokingly asks them to keep it a secret from the church, but they are honestly worried about him. Yuka tells them there's no need to worry for now since it seems like Persephone just took a liking to him for some reason, so the mark shouldn't be a problem for now. Just then, someone starts banging on their front door, and they hear the voice of Bizio yelling for them to get out here. Yuka heads outside to deal with him, and Bizio arrogantly yells at him for taking so long to open the door. He then tries to punch Yuka, but Yuka just kicks him in the nuts. Bizio's guards attempt to draw their swords after seeing their master get nut-tapped, but they are immediately knocked out by Min and Marina. Yuka then tells Bizio that if he was hoping that Simone succeeded in blackmailing them, then he's sorely mistaken, and after the injuries Simone sustained, he most likely already died in the dungeon. Bizio starts to panic a little, but he is still certain that Simone would have at least succeeded in putting the slave collar on Rain, so he pulls out a slave-controlled gem and orders Rain to come out here. Rain slowly exits the house, so Bizio believes the slave collar must have worked, but then she whacks him over the head with a steel rod. She's about to double-tap him to make sure he stays down, but Yuka stops her because killing him in broad daylight would get them in trouble with the law. Rain agrees to stop since Yuka asked her, but she's not letting Bizio leave here without a fitting punishment, so she holds up the slave collar and sticks it around his neck. She then picks up the control gem and tells him that if he ever shows his face anywhere near them again, she'll make him die an excruciatingly painful death. Bizio begs Rain to understand that he just wants her to like him, but Rain tells him she belongs to Yuka, so she'd never like someone like him. Bizio can't believe what he just heard, and Yuka is getting sick of Bizio's obsession with Rain, so he walks up to him and uses dark magic to cast a spell on him. Now, if he even attempts to get close to Rain, his blood will boil and his balls will explode. That should be enough to keep him away for good, so Yuka then hands Bizio over to the police so he can face justice for his crimes. And in the meantime, they get their gear ready for the rescue mission. They've got all the weapons and medicine they could possibly need, but they can't begin the mission until they've gotten another scroll to exit. They are pretty rare, so even with Benwood helping them look for one, there's no guarantee that they'll be able to get it in time. Just then, someone starts pounding on their front door, so Yuka goes to see who it is and meets Lucent, the leader of the A-rank party, Scordia. He heard that Yuka needed a scroll of exit, and he just so happened to have one on hand, so he's here to give it to him. But before he does, he asks Yuka why he is heading into the achromatic dungeon again. Yuka tells him he's going to rescue a friend in danger, and that's all Lucent needed to hear, so he hands the scroll over to Yuka and wishes him luck. With this, Yuka and the others head down to the entrance of the achromatic dungeon, but Benwood and Mamara meet him there and tell him that the board has decided that it is too dangerous to send a rescue team to save Jamie. With that said, Benwood has no intention of stopping them from going in, but he will be forced to sanction them when they return. And Yuka is fine with that since Jamie's life is on the line here. Benwood asks Yuka if he even knows where to look for Jamie down there, and while Yuka isn't exactly certain, he is sure everything will work out. From what he has learned about the achromatic dungeon, it is a dungeon that leads you to entirely different worlds, and he is fairly certain that the world you end up in is determined by the adventurer's subconscious thought. That's why when Benwood and Mamar went into the dungeon believing it was the most dangerous dungeon ever, that's exactly what they got. But when Yuka and his party entered with the goal of searching for abnormalities, they encountered the most abnormal place possible. Following that logic, if they go into the dungeon with the goal of finding Jamie, then the dungeon should take them straight to wherever Jamie is. The group heads into the dungeon and rush forward to take down the monsters on the first floor as quickly as possible. And now that they've cleared the first floor, they head down the staircase in hopes that it will skip them to the floor Jamie is stuck on. And it looks like it worked because they end up on a new floor, so Jamie must be around here somewhere. But this place is creeping everyone out because it looks like it has been completely destroyed, so Silk suggests they should hurry up and find Jamie so they can leave as soon as possible. Just then, Min finds a trail of blood leading into an apartment complex, so the group follows it, and they find Jamie badly injured and bleeding out by the well. But she isn't the only one there. Simon suddenly appears, and Yuka is shocked to see him because there's no way he could have survived the dungeon after all the injuries he suffered. As Simon approaches, everyone is put on edge because he was already bad enough when he was just a human, but now he's something else entirely. It's the feeling they had when they went up against the Shadow Stalker, leading Yuka to realize what must have happened. Among the artifacts that Bizio gave Simon, there was one that was particularly dangerous, and Simon must have used it to turn himself into an undead so he could stay alive. And Simon is still hell-bent on making Yuka suffer for everything he has had to go through. Marina charges forward to try and stop Simon, so Yuka gives her a physical enchantment boost as she clashes with him. Simon still outclasses Marina in strength, so it's hard for her to make progress against him, but she is still quick enough to get one hit in and slashes his arm off before retreating. A missing arm would normally be game over for Simon, but now that he's undead, he easily regenerates his arm like nothing ever happened. Simon proudly tells them that he has become immortal, so no matter what they try, they will never be able to kill him. And Simon's not going to stop until he has killed Yuka. He launches an energy blast at the group, so Yuka pulls out a light shield scroll to protect everyone. Yuka may have hated Simon, but he never wanted to kill him. However, that thing is no longer human, so he is left with no choice but to strike Simon down so he can rescue Jamie. Simon charges at Yuka, but Yuka sidesteps him and casts a trap spell. Marina and Neen then run in to strike while Silk and Rain both cast spells to slow Simon down, but doesn't work. Simon is able to break free instantly, so Yuka charges back in and begins slashing away at him. But no matter how much Yuka injures Simon just regenerates from the damage, so he tells Yuka that he is wasting his time. With this immortal body, Simon believes he is invincible, so he is going to make it his mission to ensure that Yuka and his friends never make it out of here alive. Yuka thinks back to his childhood days when Simon was still a decent person, and he can't believe that Simon really devolved into this lunatic in front of him. But what's done is done, so Yuka raises his sword and prepares to finish this. He summons the power of Persephone's mark and begins casting his most powerful attack spell. Simon doesn't even bother trying to interrupt him because he is sure that no spell in the world could ever kill him. Yuka finishes his chant and casts Prismatic Missile at Simon, and at first it doesn't seem to do anything, so Simon laughs and tells Yuka that there's nothing he can do to kill him. And while that may be true, Yuka tells him he's going to wish he could die in a second. Simon doesn't understand what Yuka is talking about, but all of a sudden, his head explodes from the inside out. Simon's body tries to regenerate, but it keeps exploding over and over, so Simon screams out in agony, and Yuka turns to walk away. Marina asks him if he's not going to finish Simon off, but Yuka says he can't because Simon really is immortal. That spell he cast was a modified prismatic missile, which in theory will remain active until its target dies. So with Simon's immortal body, he is doomed to suffer constant agony for all eternity. Yuka feels terrible about what he has just done, but he was left with no other choice. He then walks over to check on Jamie's condition, but it's not looking good for her. Rain has been trying to cast healing magic on Jamie for a while now, but it's not working. Yuka asks Rain if she's got any healing potions left, and she does, but even the healing potion doesn't work. Jamie tells them that it's an effect of Simon's magic blade, so no amount of healing magic will ever close the wound. She tells Yuka it's over for her, but Yuka refuses to let her die, so he decides to use Persephone's mark. He has no idea if this will work, but he puts Jamie's hand on the mark and casts Dispel Magic on her, and it successfully lifts the curse from Simon's sword. Jamie is relieved that Yuka managed to save her, but she's lost a lot of blood, so she ends up passing out. Yuka's worried about her, but Rain says she should be fine after she gets a little rest. Now that everyone is safe, Mean says they should hurry and get out of here because it just turned nighttime and a ton of Shadow Stalkers are spawning. The Shadow Stalkers spot Simon on the floor in pain, and they decide to add to his suffering by ripping him to shreds over and over. Yuka still feels guilty for causing Simon's eternal suffering, but there's nothing that can be done for him now, so Yuka pulls out the scroll of exit and says goodbye to the man who was once his friend. After returning, Yuka and Jamie are summoned by Benwood, and Benwood says that as the guild master, he is obligated to punish Clover for their actions. Yuka already expected this since they did go into a dungeon that was meant to be sealed, but the only punishment Benwood is giving Clover is a 1-month suspension. Yuka is surprised that that's all. But then Benwood turns to Jamie, and as a former member of Thunder Pike, he is required to punish her as well for her role in the party's crimes. But all she's getting is 1-year suspension. Jamie asks if he's sure she should get off so lightly because Thunder Pike did a lot of awful stuff, and she was an accomplice to most of it, so she was sure that she would be exiled. But while that may be true, Mamar says Jamie earned some leniency by providing evidence of Thunder Pike's crimes, and she never directly participated in any of their illegal activities, so there is no need to punish her further. As they are leaving the guild, Jamie apologizes to Yuka because Clover got punished for coming to save her, but Yuka tells her she doesn't have to worry about it. Jamie tells her she can't just stop worrying about it because she took advantage of Yuka's kindness for so long. She is disgusted with herself for just going along with all the abuse the party dished out on Yuka. She asks him if he thinks she can change, but Yuka tells her she has already changed a lot because she just apologized to him and they are having a normal conversation. Honestly, Yuka sometimes wonders if things might have been different if he had been more vocal about all the things he did to help Thunder Pike back then, but there's no use in thinking about it now. He asks Jamie if she's ready to go home yet because he's sure her brother must be waiting for her, so she thanks him one final time and the two go their separate ways. This was the end of episode 8. Subscribe to not miss the next part.